Today's lecture will be delivered by Dr. G. Narari Shastri, Director CSI NIST Jorat. So I request that Dr. Shastri to kindly deliver his talk. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Devobrit. Again, I heard that yesterday there was a problem with the slides, and the central theme of the summer research training program is somehow engage all of you who are logged out in doing some sort of time or engage in scientific discussions and deliberations. So, in this pursuit, knowledge society is something that we all have to aim. And I would like to repeat what has been said yesterday, that knowledge society is the one that uses knowledge holistically to empower and enrich people. And it is an integral driver of sustainable development for the societal transformation. A lifelong learning society committed to innovation. This is a very, very important statement. So, any knowledge society should realize the importance of lifelong learning, and also we need to be committed to innovation. A knowledge society has the capacity to generate, diffuse, utilize and protect knowledge, creates economic wealth and social equity. And the last sentence enlightens people towards an integrated view of life as a fusion of mind, body and spirit. Please try to understand that there is not much of a science here. It's about a society which is motivated to be really good in a holistic sense. So when it comes to science, the last century and the current century, unprecedented gains in advancing human development and eradicating poverty came largely from technological breakthroughs. This is what we generally understand. So let us now try to see what are the threats in the society. We always feel that terrorism is a big threat, the poverty, the fear, depression, unemployment, price hike, racism. These are all the threats that are there in the society. But now we found out that the pandemic or a natural disaster is a bigger threat. So if you look at the threats to human society, there are wars, there are pandemics, and there are natural disasters. And I would like to have a quick overview of the wars, pandemics, and natural disasters. So the Mongol conquests, early 13th century, an estimated 60 to 70 million people died. And more interestingly, more surprisingly, about 100,000 people committed mass suicide during that procedure. The Manchu conquest of China was fought for over 60 years in the 17th century, and about 25 million lives were lost. The Napoleon Wars, there were a series of wars declared against Napoleon's French Empire in 1789, and these wars have consumed the lives of over 6.5 million people. And we know the famous World War I and World War II led to engage almost all nations in the world on one side or the other. Even if you look at the Indian history, there are several wars like the Panipat, in which 15,000 to 16,000 soldiers were killed by the Mughals. And the first battle of Panipat was a crucial turning point in the history of India in 1526, where Delhi is conquered. Delhi was conquered. And then this Talikota War, Karnal War, Plassey War, and Kohima War. I wanted to tell you that during these wars, many strategies were developed. If you look at World War II, World War II has resulted in a large number of discoveries in science and technology. A huge amount of progress was made in understanding the fundamental principles of science and their applications. The whole of nuclear physics, nuclear chemistry for the exploitation as a warfare or other things have begun in World War II. So if you look at pandemics, like what we are witnessing for the first time in the history, the COVID pandemic, there were Bombay plague, there was swine flu in India, and 1994 there was another plague. There was a little smallpox pandemic in 1974 in India, and there is also a flu. So the plague of Justinian, probably that has almost eradicated the whole population in the world. The Black Death, the Great Plague of London, smallpox, cholera, and the Spanish flu, which occurred in 1918, are some of the worst pandemics that the human race have witnessed. And there are earthquakes, hurricanes, cyclones, and there are several natural disasters like Iran earthquake, Pakistan earthquake, Hurricane Katrina, China earthquake, Haiti earthquake, tsunami of 2011, and Tohoku earthquake and associated tsunami. And you have many natural disasters that has happened. Almost any country or any region that you take, there were a large number of natural disasters. And in Northeast India, we have almost floods every year, including this year. So there are floods and earthquakes, and in some places landslides, which are creating problems for the human survival. But how do we face them? I think to face them, you need to use the science and technology in the most judicious fashion. If you see the human evolution, it started from hunters and gatherers to agricultural laborers and colonization, and afterwards people are still trying to have a better and better systematic life and more better quality of life and having a sustainable future wherein people have access to food, people have access to water, people have access to shelter. And people have tried to see that there are foods which are getting rotten, and they try to somehow see how to really preserve this rotten food. And if it is a cold temperature, they used to collect some ice from the river or try to make a way of, because if there is a problem, like the food is getting rotten, people are coming with a solution of how to prevent this or delayed or arrested. So ice machine have come, and then there is modern refrigerator, and so many developments have happened just because there is one particular need. So we all know that necessity is the mother of invention, and whenever somebody has the necessity, they will come up with an invention which will meet the need. And similarly, healthcare problems are there, diseases are there, and pharmaceuticals have come. And people are very curious to know what is there in the space, what is there up in the sky. And that first has led people to work towards exploring the space. And when people go from one place to another place, they require some way of getting transport. They can go by walk, and initially they have used animals, and as they are progressing, they have used better way of using the animals, and they also have various devices, mechanical devices and engines, and the transport has become possible because people continually worked on developing newer and newer prototypes or newer and newer ways of designing the vehicles, which resulted in better transport. So if you look at history of industrial revolutions, all of you know there are several industrial revolutions starting from late 17th century. So commercial use of steam engine is probably one of the important revolution where people can transport things in a massive scale, and then they have used cast iron and water power silk mills and maintenance of roads and iron plows and flying shuttle, and discovery of sulfuric acid has played a very, very important role in the industrial revolution in the 18th century, and hydraulic blowing engines. There are machines which will drill the bores, and spinning jenny, spinning mule, and these things have played a very important role. So the late 18th century have witnessed what is known as Industry 1.0, that is mechanization. Mechanization had played a very, very important role in bringing a revolution. What do we mean by revolution? Change is always incremental, but sometimes because of some discovery or a new way of doing things, there is a big change, or you go in an incremental fashion or you leapfrog, but there are certain technologies which were developed that will make you pole vault, or these things are called disruptive technologies, and mechanization is one such technology. Then in 19th century, electrification played a very, very important role. Electrification led to mass production using assembly lines. That is probably, it can be termed as Industry 2.0. Afterwards, the most significant progress in industrial revolution is automation. Then there are things like electronics and computer applications played a very important role in automation. And then globalization has become one of the important impetus for industrialization of the entire world. Offshoring of production to low-cost economy. For example, you can discover something and you can offshore the production to another place so that you will be able to produce things cheaper in a cheap fashion, because it may be possible that you will be able to get enough labor in some place and then they may be less expensive. So this is probably Industry 3.5, and digitalization is the Industry 4.0. Interconnection of devices, artificial intelligence, and data analytics, they play an important role. So now people are trying to look from Industry 4.0 to 5.0. That is, Industry 4.0 has more manufacturing, lightouts, industrial IoT, and data storage and remote programming, big data, and cyber physical systems like connections, cyber and cognition configuration. Industry 5.0 is to customize, personalize, and real-time access. So, Industry 5.0 or the future industrial applications is that you try to customize every product for that particular need or sometimes even for a particular individual, right? And you try to personalize. Applications adopt lifestyles and personalities, personalizes healthcare, and real-time access. Access to real-time data to predict failures and provide remote solution. These things are probably going to be very, very important in the future. What I mean to say is, people are evolving in terms of the way that they are doing. We started from Industry 1.0, mechanization to electrification to automation, globalization and digitalization, and you are going from there to human-centric solutions where you customize, personalize, and have a real-time access to specifically find solutions or answers for the questions that you have or for a particular individual. It might not be general to everybody. It will be very, very specific to a particular individual. So there are several revolutions, small revolutions that are there. And the most famous among them is the Green Revolution. Green Revolution is exclusively responsible for providing food for everybody, right? And there are different types of revolution, like brown revolution for leather, pink revolution for drugs, black revolution for petroleum, and people have names like golden revolution for horticulture, round revolution for potato. Potato revolution is very, very important. And gray revolution for fertilizers, brown revolution for leather, and another very important revolution that has occurred in India is white revolution in the production of milk and the milk powder. And silver revolution maybe for eggs and tomato and meat, and blue revolution for fish, and yellow revolution for oilseeds. So you have revolutions, and sometimes people try to make progress, and when they are trying to make progress, there are confrontations. We are celebrating National Technology Day on 11th May, and most of us in India are very proud because we are able to conduct the nuclear tests, the Pokhran tests in May 1998, and this particular day was declared as National Technology Day. And the objective is highlighting and celebrating groundbreaking achievements and valuable contributions of our scientists and engineers in the field of science and technology. So, for a country like us to have the particular technology in the nuclear energy production or even for the peaceful purposes, it's very important to possess. But Others do not think like this. Immediately after the conduct of Pokhran tests, several countries have put so many conditions in India. United States cut off all assistance except humanitarian aid. It also banned the export of certain defense materials and technologies because India has conducted this test. And US has ended American credit and credit guarantees to India. Economically, socially, in all these ways, we were hit because we conducted the Pokhran tests. Okay. So Canada, Japan, and other countries were strongly taking objection. So there is a strong criticism by Canada and freezing of all loans and grants by Japan. And of course, Pakistan blames India for instigating nuclear arms race in the region. And the suspension of foreign aid caused a total loss of inflow of foreign exchange at US dollar 2.8 billion. However, after few years, US removed the sanction to open up its $3 trillion market for the companies. And soon after, it has removed even the remaining sanctions. Why? Because it was very difficult to ignore the contribution of India. And yesterday, I have tried to explain this, and I just wanted to show you that this is a slide, and the slide will highlight how do we focus, how we have to focus, what is the need of focusing, right, to succeed. So I just wanted to tell you that there are problems and there are issues for everybody in their life. Unless they try to find out solutions in a holistic way, it will be very difficult to reach the sustainability. Now, let us take the COVID. The COVID pandemic that we have is a very, very challenging thing. But this is also giving us an opportunity to learn many things. Now, we have to realize that because of COVID, we are able to understand so many things which we otherwise have difficulty to understand. For example, there is an over dependence on China on every aspect, on every walk of our life. We are producing a large number of pharmaceutical products, which are mostly generic products. However, most of the APIs and the reagents and the reactants are imported from China. Every single item that we are producing here, we are not getting all the ingredients from India. We are dependent quite a lot on China. This should be looked at. This should be really be looked at. And we wanted to know why we are not able to produce. It's very important to be able to produce and then to be able to have an edge over other countries, right? And we also have to see that because of this COVID, we are not able to go to United States to pursue studies. So the question is, why should we go to United States? Is it not possible to have a good education system in India? And a large number of people who go to US will have to pay the tuition fee. And it's very funny that there are a number of Indians who go there as professors and also a number of Indians who go there as students. And these students will have to pay the yearly fee to study in the United States. And what is the benefit that our country is getting from these students? So one has to look at, one has to see that probably giving a proper education is very important, and probably it's also a great business. It's very important to create the jobs. And we have to realize that there are countries which are sending back the Indian laborers back, Indian workers back, maybe Indian students or Indian intellectuals. So there are people who are living abroad for several years are coming back to India. So is it an advantage or it's a disadvantage? It is for the people to see. And I just wanted to tell you that it's extremely important. It's extremely important for us to look at what are the advantages that we have and what are the disadvantages that we have. And COVID is probably very, very good in a way. It gives us an opportunity to have a very critical assessment of what you are doing. I strongly feel that there are a number of issues which can be fixed if you are able to think clearly. Now coming to COVID itself, how bad it is. It is a pandemic which we have seen for the first time. But however, one has to realize that its mortality rate is not very, very high. And in contrast, it is abysmally low. But its transmittivity is very high. And the mechanism of transmission was not very clearly understood. For example, aerial route. Is it able to see that from an aerial route whether somebody can be infected or not? Earlier, people used to think that the chances are very, very less. But now there is enough evidence which is coming that we cannot rule out aerial route. And we also have to see whether an asymptomatic patient, or what does it mean, a person which was infected with corona, but not having any symptom, will he be more dangerous or less dangerous? We were given to understand that probably such people are more dangerous because they don't know that they have no idea that they are having a corona. That's why they move freely and then people will get infected. And this is not going to be a very, very good situation. But now recently there's an evidence which is coming that probably asymptomatic cases are not very dangerous. We don't know. A lot of work has to be done. But what is extremely important is to have awareness about the situation that is prevailing here. So the biggest challenge that corona has is the infected people should have the treatment. You have to trace, test, and treat, or test, trace, and treat. Treating is very, very important. What does it mean? You need to have enough healthcare workers. But it is also important to have a good lifestyle. And we probably should know under what conditions somebody has to visit the hospital. Under what conditions they have to be under quarantine and isolation. There are several guidelines that are being fixed, and people are now beginning to understand under what conditions what is the best option to exercise. So somebody will say that there will be a vaccine by 16th August. Those of you who have heard my lecture know that there are several stages. There will be phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical trials for any molecule which has to be used as a medicine. And it is very unlikely that you will get a medicine, you will get a vaccine quickly, and even getting a medicine which will completely cure COVID is a daunting task. But we should not stop. We have to work on this. But we also have to realize that improving the immunity is the only way, and or it's the most straightforward way to be safe, not only from COVID, but also from other infectious diseases. And people have to realize that there are terrible infectious diseases that are there. And we are not so much bothered. The reason is, it's not because they are not dangerous. Probably it's because we know about them. We know how to control or how to cure, or at least the doctors will know that they are very, very familiar with influenza or common cold and other viral diseases. Whereas this new virus is not very well understood. Till it is understood in a proper way, it will be very difficult to make bold predictions. So I feel that we have to believe that science and technology are extremely, extremely important for the development of any place, whether it may be a village, it may be a district, or it may be a state, or it's a country. So people who has to get into doing science should realize that they have a great opportunity to enjoy their life. And when the humanity is confronted with big challenges like pandemic or war or a natural disaster, the most intelligent people should come forward and give their might. So, as far as SRTP is concerned, I just wanted to tell you one more time that please enjoy and have fun. Try to do some summer project and listen to the lectures, whatever that is permitted to you, but don't miss out the eminent lectures, because these people have really, really contributed something, and we take a lot of pain and effort to convince these people to come and then give the lectures and interact with you. And with this, I would like to say that SRTP is successful only when you are able to use your time to enjoy doing science. That's very, very important. And I hope that at least a good number of people who are there will be motivated by this summer research training program. And I feel that instead of giving talk every day, I decided that I will try to give a talk every Friday. So once a week. And this Friday, day after tomorrow, I will give the talk. And from then onwards, I will give talk only on Fridays at 9 p.m. And in the coming talks, I will try to spend more time on role models and individuals and how they are responsible in trying to build themselves and then help the countries, and then why we have to remember them. It's extremely important to be able to know the history of science, and it is also important to know what are the personalities of various scientists. And I would like to make an attempt towards this. As I was telling you that I don't want these lectures to be more than 30-35 minutes. And now I have completed these 35 minutes and I will be taking a few questions, and maybe Dr. Nagamani or Devabrat or somebody can take it. So there are, Nagamani, would you like to ask some questions or should I just see and then?
Sir, I can ask some questions.
Yeah, please.
Um, Sir, someone who anonymous, they ask, sir, how can we keep our society on hold with the mythological ideas and science?
Very interesting. Actually, in the West, there is always a conflict between science and the religion. And there is always a fight between the church and the science. Whereas in India, most of the scientific progress was based on the mythology or spiritual practices. And spirituality need not be religious. So in India, it is very interesting to see that the culture is such that one need not be so strict and adhere to a particular process, even if there is no rationale for that. Because many of the people would like to follow only when there is a rationale. So the science and spirituality always go hand in hand in the land of India, irrespective of whatever religion that they belong to. So it is possible to balance these two, and more importantly, science is very important. And science is based on reason, based on the rationality. So it is perfectly possible, and there are a large number of people who are still trying to understand the science, the mythology, and other things from a scientific pursuit.
Yes, sir. Sir, Sujata C asks, WHO claimed COVID-19 is airborne. So what is your opinion regarding this?
I think COVID is the current evidence show that there is a very good possibility that it will be airborne, especially in a closed room. So when someone speaks or talks, there will be particles of different size which will come out, and the particles which are very light will have a very high possibility to be in the atmosphere for a reasonable amount of time. And Japanese have done experiments on that, and there is a very high degree of possibility that COVID can be transmitted through air, especially in tighter compartments and in air-conditioned rooms. And as more and more number of people increase, there is a definitive possibility. And people are also now realizing that for infection to occur, the viral load is also a very critical point. So I'm not a virologist, but as far as what I gather and see some of the experiments that were done, there is enough reason to believe that COVID can be airborne, and one has to be one has to be a bit careful. Having said that, it is not airborne if you are going out in the public. What I am trying to say is in a closed room. For example, if you are going in an air-conditioned car, there is a definitive possibility that one can transmit COVID from one person to another person. Or if you are in a conference hall where a large number of people are there, and there is a good possibility that the aerial transmission can occur.
And sir, Chinmay C asks, what is your opinion on exploitation of natural resources due to growing demand in this industrial revolution? Can't we meet industrial demands without exploiting natural resources?
This is a very important question. Exploiting natural resources in a reasonable way is essential for survival. Nature is like our mother, and you require your mother to survive. It's absolutely important. And without using the natural resources, you cannot survive. But only thing is, we should be very much responsible. We live on the everything that mothers gives us, right? But at the same time, you have to be responsible and you have to see that you will not hurt. And it is as same as that. And without using natural resources, one cannot survive. But one has to use these natural resources in a responsible way. And one also has to have plans and strategies of how to sustain these natural resources and how to preserve them. And definitely, without any doubt, we need and we depend on the natural resources, and without which it will be very difficult to sustain. Natural resources are essential for sustainability, and that is actually also a very good reason for us to use them in a proper way.
Thank you, sir. And sir, Sangeeta C asks, what do you think about the Indian education system compared with other countries? And also, what is your opinion on research opportunities in India when compared to other countries?
This is a very important question. India is a democratic country, and the education system could have been better, but it all depends on the individuals. And if you look at the entrance examination for IITs, this is one of the most competitive. And the children who are appearing for these IIT exams and the top 100,000 or 200,000, they are the best in the world. And these people can be comparable to anybody in their age group, much better than them. This is probably one of the toughest to crack. And so is our AIMS exam, so is our NEET exam, the toppers. However, when it comes to research and research opportunities, we have to realize that we are not able to provide or allocate enough resources. And more importantly, we are not really understanding that the fundamental passion to do science or to excel in research should be within a particular person. But many times the society is guided by the fact that they have to survive. They have to really get the money or they have to get the security. This is a very strongly embedded in our culture. So Indian education system has some weaknesses and some loopholes. As we are not from a very rich country, we have some limitations. But there are lots of scopes for people who wanted to excel. It's very important that we need to give our best, we need to work very hard, and there is a lot of scope for people to get a very, very good life if they are working very hard. It may be very difficult for me to convince a large number of you thinking that somehow you want to manage something or somehow somebody get a job and there's a lot of corruption, there are some politics. But please believe that if you are really good and talented, it doesn't matter whether you have a degree or whether you don't have a degree. India requires a large number of talented people, as I said on the other day. So the research opportunities one has to create. There's a lot of scope, right? And there are possibilities, and young people should be very, very positive. And I feel that India is a wonderful country. Sometimes we do not optimally use our democracy, and many times we abuse our democracy, and people have to increase a little bit of their positive attitude towards life and positive attitudes to our country. And probably I have visited 20-25 countries in my life. And at least in 7 countries, I have spent more than 6 months as working either as a postdoc or a visiting professor, spending about 3-4 months, and then work very closely with a number of universities across different countries. And India is definitely a great place to be in. The type of advantages that you have. And more importantly, India is having all the problems that you can think about. This itself is an advantage. And if you are able to do some very, very good work, you will be having a lot of satisfaction. Maybe getting recognition will be a little bit delayed, but this is a perfect platform. India is a great country for you to quench all your thirst, to help people. If you want to help people, there are people to get your help. And there are also very, very talented people from whom one can learn. So I feel that instead of finding some faults that are there in the education systems, people should try to find out what are the advantages that we have, and then if they stay positive, they will definitely have great advantages.
Sir, there is another question in the same line by Ms. Amala. Can India be considered equal with other developed nations in terms of technologies used in research?
Probably not, because if you go to some of the top universities, some lab, a single lab, will have the facilities which are much more superior compared to the entire university that you have. If you look at United States, it has about 400 million population and it has close to 5,000 universities. Whereas India, which has 3 times more population, or more than 3 times, has less than 1/4. United States has 4,500 to 5,000 universities. India has about 800 universities. And even in most of the universities, you don't have basic facilities. There are universities without a proper instrumentation room. And there are so many issues, right? So there are problems. But in India, there are also some places which are comparable with the best in the world. And slowly we are making a good progress in the last 2 decades. And people are becoming rich. And the advantage that we have is we have a lot of young population and there's a lot of potential. And sometimes lack of facilities and lack of money may bring forth your innovation or your innate desire to excel even more strongly. So the question is, we don't have good facilities comparable with the best in the world, but we are better than many other countries. right? And in some cases, India at least have a handful of institutes whose facilities are comparable with the best in the world. Yeah.
Sir, Avinash is asking, what do you think that our country is in good position in combating COVID-19?
Country consists of people, right? Because we are able to do a reasonably good job in doing the capacity building. COVID testing is increasing in a great way. And as we were discussing on the other day, the PPE kits, ventilator preparation is going on in full swing. And we are all very proud that we are able to launch the vaccine clinical trials. And in terms of the finding new drugs, India is making a terrific progress. And we are also trying to go not only with the modern medicine route, but also Ayush route. And probably it's a great opportunity for India to come together and then try to find out solutions for COVID. Yeah, my question is, I'm very positive that COVID is making us realize where are the gaps. And country is making a reasonable progress in trying to bridge these gaps.
Thank you, sir. And Priyanka Sharma, she is asking, what can we do for our country from our home during this pandemic situation?
Yeah, Priyanka, you have to become a good scientist because the collective wisdom is important and we have to go towards a knowledge society. If somebody becomes a very good scientist, maybe they will come up with a solution which will not only solve the problems of the country, but also problems of the world. So, what we can do sitting at home, it's not clear. What we can do sitting in a scientific lab, it's also not very clear. Is it possible that if you sit in a scientific lab with all the sophisticated instruments, will you be able to come up with a solution for a problem? Probably sometimes you may even get great ideas sitting at home. So if you are a young person, you have to improve your technical skills. Or if you have some ideas, you have to go deeper into it and then see whether they are practical or not. And it's very, very important to be able to be realizing that even when you are at home, you may get some great ideas. So you have to give yourself that particular opportunity.
Sir, Mr. Subhasis is asking, why in India we are not able to develop like a manufacturing hub, we are not able to produce in our India?
Yeah, it's because of lack of planning. It is not a difficult thing because of lack of planning only. Now, probably thanks to COVID, people are realizing and Indian government is spending a lot of money in MSME, micro, small and medium enterprises. And hopefully our ability to make most of the things in India will increase. And as far as I understood, government is taking very, very effective steps to see if anything can be made here, we will make here and we will not import.
And one more question from Ambrish. What will be the impact of COVID-19 in socio-economic condition, especially middle class and lower class people in India?
Yeah, this is unfortunately it is going to be a problem, right? Unemployment will increase, and I don't think that I don't think that this will be a disaster, but it will create some short-term problems to people. and we have to somehow see or innovate things of how people can come out of this. It may be possible if they lose job in a particular direction, they will have to see what more jobs can be created, how we can have a employment, and maybe one should be spending a lot of time to see how they can come out of this situation. I again say that necessity is the mother of invention, and if somebody is hit hard, either they have a chance to fall or they have a chance to fight. And only the fighter will survive, and if somebody falls, they fall. Survival of the fittest. So now the situation is very tough, so only the tough will survive and others will not be able to survive.
Sir, and Dr. Rohini, she is asking, what type of efforts are needed for India industry-oriented education and also IPR-related education, intellectual property rights?
Yeah. These are professional things, and then one has to learn and one has to see the acts that are there. And industry-related education depends on the market need, the local need, what type of an industry that one would like to establish. If they are really going to establish an industry, or if they want to get into understanding the industrial chemistry or establishing the industries, that's another ball game. And IPR related is also very, very important, because if somebody ignores IPR and spend a lot of time, probably they will be wasting a lot of time. We have to realize that we can get everything in life, but not the time that is lost. So every day is very important, and so are the days in lockdown. So try to improve your skill set, whether you want to get into industry related or IPR related. Knowledge is important, and I strongly believe that reading, reading books, reading fundamental books, reading literature is very, very important. So I think the most important practice is if somebody can read and spend and improve their comprehension, that will help both in the professional as well as intellectual life.
Sir, Miss Bhavya, she is asking, what is IoT in Industry 4.0?
Internet of Things. IoT, there are so many applications that are based on IoT, and maybe I may even give a lecture on IoT. This is something very much indispensable in the current day technology, Internet of Things, and you can try to read a little bit, and then maybe between 21st to at the end of this month, there will be a few lectures on IoT.
And Bubbling Car is asking, in industrialization and many improvement programs do help in betterment of livelihood, but our nature gradually go further. So he just want to ask, like, whether because of this industrialization, whether like our life is moving further or it is circum our life.
Basically, one has to see that in the human evolution, somebody will think that this is like a cycle, but if it's a linear one, we are seeing that there is more mechanization and less of a human work. And there are some people who will have objections, but nothing
It's 10 o'clock.
Prevents people from working hard, right? So I am not very pessimistic about it. in contrast, I'm very optimistic that the industrialization will improve the quality of life and things will be better.
Thank you, sir. And I hope I have covered almost most of the major questions. What is there in the news?
Okay. Thank you, because we would like to stop at 10. And more importantly, these are the times where people have to engage themselves in doing something good. And I feel that doing science is the best. And I will try to come on this Friday and also next Friday, because this Friday I would like to prepare a little bit and then talk to you about the importance of studying people who have done something great. And also I will try to talk to you about people who has a good attitude and a better attitude, have come up in life, and there are a lot of very intelligent people who have an attitude which is not very desirable, have to pay a lot of price in their life. And I strongly tell you that one message, that you have to read books, and also you try to take up one idea, and this idea is should be very important for you. And I would like to project this Swami Vivekananda's setting up a goal. The goal is take up one idea, make that one idea your life, think of it, dream of it, live on that idea. Let the brain, muscles, nerves, and every part of your body be full of that idea. This is the way to success. This is the way to focus. Please try to focus on whatever that you do and try to excel, and understand that excellence is not an accident, and it is possible to achieve it with very, very good plan. And I am really thankful for you for listening to me, and I will try to see you day after tomorrow. Thank you very much, and Jai. Is that okay? Any, Nagamani, any questions are there, or?
No, sir.
I feel that there are many questions which are not answered, and we will try to put it as many answers as possible for these questions, and then see that the people who have asked this question will also have answers. Thank you
Yes.
very much. Good night.
Good night.